One of the sayings I love is life isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to what happens to you. America is a wonderful place. We always say we embrace failure, which is bullshit, but we tolerate it. And I've started, I think, 8 businesses, and I'm kind of realistically three and two. That's generous, but all you need is kind of one big win. I sold profit for 30 million. I sold my last company for 160, and all you need is a couple of those, and you're done. You're fine.
Skills are the only thing that we'll always appreciate in time and work in compound in concert. So when they work together, if you know how to do math, then you can learn how to do accounting. If you learn how to do accounting, you can learn how to do tax work. If you learn how to do tax work, you can figure out how insurance works. If your insurance works, then you all of a sudden you're a CFO and you can prepare companies for sale. Like the skills stack on top of each other. And specialized skills are valuable independent of the currency or the economic climate. And so if you are good, you will always have a place to provide value because people want good stuff. Prices may vary, currencies may vary, but people will want the things you have if you are good. And the only way to get good is to work. And so I think that a lot of people spend a lot of their time in paralysis trying to figure out what the quote ideal opportunity would be when you won't know what the ideal opportunity is because you don't have a baseline. And I believe that research is done through doing. And you learn a lot more by doing stuff in action, and then you will gain the insights of where the opportunities lie.
You need to recognize there's different on-ramps to a rewarding professional life. And also, I'm a big fan of a gap year, that if you're not sure where you want to go to school or you don't go into the school you want to go to, that you should consider taking a year to work. And what the data shows is that the majority of kids who take a gap year, end up going back to college, and they actually graduate in greater rates once they have that kind of year of additional seasoning. I showed up to UCLA 17 years old, and I really wasn't prepared for it. Just kind of not so much intellectually, but just emotionally. I wasn't really responsible or mature enough for college at that point. But what I would argue is you always need to have somewhat of a path and hold yourself. There's no, this kind of you'll find your way. I would say you want to make sure you have a plan. You want to be on getting certification or education or professional experience because time goes fast. And again, and this isn't aspirational, it's just super competitive out there.
My first job was I was a blender tender at Smoothie King. First job I got. Blender tending, not a very good opportunity, right? I'm probably not going to scale that. Right? Managing there, probably not either. Owning the location, a little bit more leverage because now I have leverage on labor, right? Owning the franchise, much more, right? And so like all industries, if you go high enough up, and this is the rule of thumb for anyone, if you want to see where opportunity exists, look at the businesses that have been here the longest because they make tons of money. The only reason they would exist is because they can exist during downturns. The only way you can exist during downturn is you make tons of profits all the time so that you can weather it. Like JP Morgan's been here for longer than anybody's been alive, right? Some of the big insurance companies. Why is insurance so profitable? Because you pay them for nothing.
Right.
Like pay hundreds of, depends on what, you pay thousands and thousands a year for something that may never happen. And they just know how to appropriately value risk.
There's what I would call a bit of a crisis with young men, and that is 7 in 10 high school valedictorians are girls. There are now in universities in the U.S., it's 60% female, 40% male, which sounds bad, but it gets worse when you think about it. You show up freshman year at university, there's 50% more women, more prone to incarceration, more prone to opioid addiction, more prone to gambling problems. So I would argue relative to almost every other cohort in terms of the progress they've made the last 20 or 30 years, young males have actually made the least progress. And I think a lot about and coach a lot of young men because I think a lot of them are struggling.
And so the point is like I've now learned to see this as like when I see big businesses, the bigger the business, the more I realize that there's probably a very high gross margin opportunity. So you look at the biggest companies on the stock market, look at what they're doing. The base unit that they're selling typically has tremendous, like the biggest company in the world right now in terms of profit is like Exxon. That's number one. In terms of net free cash flow that's created. Isn't that crazy? Like people know like Facebook, no, it's Exxon. Yeah. Why? Because they drill water out of the ground and they sell it for however many $100s per, right? It's not water, it's oil, but it works the same way.
Right.
right? And that's a massive overgeneralization, but like you get the idea.
Yeah.
And so Facebook sells eyeballs, which cost them basically nothing. Google sells eyeballs that cost them basically nothing. And so all of these types of businesses, and this is where people get into the ethics around capitalism and whatnot, but like you sell for what the market values it at, period. And your goal as a business is to drive your costs down as much as you can, right? As long as you're still long-term greedy, which is if you drive them too low or you don't pay people well enough, you introduce new levels of risk, which then long-term you actually lose money. So that's when you get into the long-term, short-term, like CEO-ship of publicly traded companies and stuff, which we don't need to get into. But like if you were to only own the company and you could not ever exit and you made your decisions with long-term greed in mind, then you usually make the right calls. And I'll say one last thing about the how to get freedom. Biggest mistake that I see young people or people who are young in the game making is that they want to become millionaires in 90 days. And when most times you could guarantee that you could become a millionaire in a decade, but you have to be willing to not be a millionaire for 9 of those 10 years. And if I had everyone sign a contract that said that when they were 20, they could all be millionaires when they're 30. But no one's willing to do that. And so what happens is for the rest of their lives, they keep chasing the shiny object over and over again and keep battling the same boss and losing.
Our generation engages in concierge or bulldozer parenting, where we use so many sanitary napkins on their life, they don't develop their own immunities. They show up to college with sort of this princess and the pea syndrome, and they get their heart broken or get their first C, and they just literally freak out. And the second is social media, that especially among young girls, boys bully physically and verbally, girls bully relationally, and we put these nuclear weapons in their hands with this. I also think that more for young men, they're not, I think they've been told a little bit that they're especially white men, that they're the oppressors. And I think the opportunities that maybe you had and I had aren't as plentiful. It's much more difficult to get into a good school, and it's much more expensive. So you're faced with, do I really want to saddle my family with this debt to go to kind of a tier 2 college? So I think it's difficult. And also, the bottom line is the world is more competitive. We had sort of a monopoly on a lot of industries when you and I were coming out of school, and that trickled down to more opportunity for men. A third of the population got 80% of the spoils. And so it was just awesome to be a white dude in the 80s. And you got free education, and you got opportunity to access free education with incredible admissions rates. So there's just no getting around it. Things have gotten more competitive. I think social media has levied tremendous damage on youth. And also some of it's warranted and overdue. If a young woman does better on the SAT and has better grades, she deserves to get into a better school. And we're also bringing more international students in, which is both good and bad. It's good for diversity, but also one of the dirty secrets of college is we bring in international students because they pay full freight. And they're kind of our cash cow. We don't like to talk about it because it sounds xenophobic, but the reality is the majority of kids, international students, undergrad, not PhD, but undergrad, the thing they have in common is that their parents are rich. And I wonder if that in concert with this drunk intoxication around exclusivity, where we brag about rejecting 90% of the applicants at universities like the one I work at, NYU, I wonder if that in concert with legacies and wealthy people who can afford incredible tutors and the kind of industrial prep complex, the reality is there's just not a lot of room left for kind of average dudes. And that's what I was. So I think it's a variety of factors.
I mean, we were just sitting back, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. Tracking my roots, where I came from and where I'm going. But like I say, man,